Have you ever wondered why God's true name was hidden from humanity? Why, among so many mysteries of creation, was this very one silenced for centuries, replaced by generic titles like Lord or Adonai? What is so powerful about the sacred Tetragrammaton? Those for ancient and mysterious letters that form the name that it led kings to protect it, priests to fear it, and multitudes to never dare to pronounce it aloud. You may believe it or not. But what you're about to hear has been read by kings and forbidden for centuries. And it's no accident. We're talking about a divine enigma hidden since the beginning of creation. An ancient sound that would have been the first to vibrate in the eternal silence even before let there be light. A name that isn't just a word, but a living code. A formula of spiritual power so profound it could alter realities, open portals, and even summon the Creator himself into manifestation. What you're about to discover may surprise you. Hebrew tradition calls him Tetragrammaton, 4 letters, Yod, He, Vov. He, but what few know is that behind these letters lies a secret architecture of the universe. A map of creation, a reflection of the human being itself, and perhaps a warning. Because there are reports that pronouncing this name without spiritual preparation could have dire consequences both for the speaker and for everything around them. Have you ever experienced this? Feeling that something sacred is near, but seems forbidden? Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just another video about biblical curiosities. It's an invitation to enter sacred territory, a dive into the mysteries of creation, where theology, occultism, and sacred language intertwine like never before. What if all this hiding wasn't just to protect the name, but to protect you from the name? In the next moment, we will pierce the veil of words, and enter the silence between the letters. It is there that the true secret begins to be revealed. Each letter of the Tetragrammaton seems to carry more than sound. It carries memory. A forgotten vibration that echoes from the days when there was no time, no matter, only the invisible breath of creation. It's as if God's name shouldn't be read, but felt. And perhaps, just perhaps, those who dare approach him are touching a threshold between the divine and the abyss. If this topic resonates with you, if any part of this revelation has awakened something within you, if it's just a question that still has no answer, leave in the comments what has touched you most so far. I want to know how you feel when you hear these words, because this space is made for that. Not to impose truths, but to awaken memories that perhaps your soul already knows. And if this kind of content makes you feel part of something bigger, something that can't be explained in words but is recognized in silence, enjoy this video. This isn't just a click, it's a sign that these messages should continue to be brought to light. Your subscription here is much more than a number. It shows that there are people like you searching for answers the world has forgotten. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of profound, mysterious, and necessary content. And the most surprising thing is that we're still only scratching the surface. Because as we delve into the hidden meaning of each letter of the name, we begin to realize that it may be less of a word and more of a portal. And the real question now is, what lies on the other side? What is so powerful about God's name that the Hebrew people themselves stopped pronouncing it for fear of death? This question, which for centuries was avoided even among the most learned, carries more than a taboo, it holds a key. And perhaps this key unlocks not only the secrets of faith, but also the backstage of creation, where vibrations, sounds, and intentions became reality. To understand this sacred silence, we need to look beyond letters, beyond translation, beyond language. The word God, as you know it, is a constructed adaptation of ancient terms, steeped in context and control. But the Tetragrammaton, This is no ordinary name. It is a primal sound. A set of 4 Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Vov, He, that, according to ancient mystics, are not pronounced. They are experienced. For generations, this name was whispered. Only in the most hidden corners of the temple, and even then, only by the high priest, and only once a year, on the Day of Atonement, with awe and reverence. What was there in that sequence of letters that commanded such respect? The answer, perhaps, lies in what these letters represent. Not just sounds, but spiritual dimensions. Not just a name, but a living manifestation. Kabbalistic tradition holds that the Tetragrammaton is a vibrational formula that connects heaven and earth, a link between the invisible and the visible. Each letter corresponds to a divine emanation, a stage of creation, an active force in the universe. When aligned in sequence, they form the very flow of existence from thought to materialization. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this silence surrounding the name also tells us something about the relationship between the human and the sacred. Why silence something so divine? Is the name dangerous or simply misunderstood? Some say that, when pronounced with pure intention and heightened awareness, the Tetragrammaton can reorder reality. Others claim that it is, in fact, the ultimate expression of divine identity, so close to the essence of God that naming it would be like trying to capture infinity with a single word. And this prohibition, then, would not be just a dogma, but a protection, a boundary. Because accessing the true name of God is more than just speaking. It is transforming oneself. It is crossing a veil that separates common understanding from divine consciousness. And this veil, for many, is made of fear. For others, of respect. But for a few, it is made of desire. A desire to understand what has been hidden. A desire to access forgotten truth. A desire to reconnect with one's origin. And you. What do you feel when you hear this? Curiosity, skepticism, a certain chill deep within your soul. Whatever the feeling, it matters. Because it is precisely in this place between the known and the unknown that true mystery resides. And that's why this journey is so unique. It's not just about seeking answers, but about facing the impact they have within us. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If any part of this journey touched you in any way. Because sometimes a simple sentence is the beginning of a much greater revelation. For centuries, the most powerful name in all creation was written, but not spoken. Recorded, but hidden in pronunciation. In the sacred scriptures, this name appears thousands of times, and yet almost no one calls it. Almost no one dares to touch it with their voice. Have you ever noticed this? In modern Bible translations, when you read Lord in capital letters, you are actually looking at the Tetragrammaton, the 4 Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Vov. He. In Jewish tradition, this name is considered unpronounceable. This is no coincidence. Over the centuries, rabbis and scholars replaced it in the reading with Adonai, meaning my Lord. Later, in translations into Greek and Latin, it became known as Kyrios or Dominus. Thus, God's original name was progressively overlaid with titles. It was removed from everyday usage and relegated to ritual silence. But why so much caution? Why such reverence, even prohibiting the attempt to vocalize these 4 letters? The curious thing is that the more we try to understand the reason for this tradition, the more we realize that it's not just religious, it's energetic. Because it's not just about saying a name. It's about evoking a frequency, a vibration that, according to the ancients, resonated with the very fabric of the universe. The mentality of that time was deeply sensitive to the impact of sound. Sound was sacred. Speech had creative, constructive, or destructive power. And the name of God, in this context, was seen as a direct channel to the source, a bridge between the visible and the invisible. something that should be preserved, respected, and, above all, protected. And so, amidst awe and reverence, our tradition was born. Only the high priest could pronounce it, and only once a year within the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. And even he had to be purified, spiritually prepared, in profound silence. Because there, in that sacred space-time, the name was not redit, was felt as a living presence. A manifestation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the way this name was passed down through the generations reveals more than a tradition. It reveals a decision. A choice made by those who understood that certain hidden truths needed to be veiled, not erased, but hidden in plain sight, hidden between the lines in the symbols, in the subtle layers of the text. And it is precisely in these layers that we begin to see that the Tetragrammaton is not just a name. It is a revelation, a kind of access code to the divine essence, a spiritual secret embedded in the very fabric of reality, as if each letter carried a frequency, a stage of the creative journey, a reflection of human existence itself in its purest form. Some mystical scholars claim that the Yod represents the initial spark creative thought, the starting point, the first impulse of the invisible, the first moment of being. The first, he would be the expansion of this spark, the emanation that gives form to the invisible. The Vav, in turn, connects the high to the low, the spiritual to the earthly, like a bridge or a channel. And the last, he symbolizes the final manifestation, the birth of the visible, of form, time, and matter. And so, the name that many today read as YHWH transforms between the lines into an entire narrative, not just about God, but about you, about your existence, your origin, your connection to something that is beyond rational understanding. Because this name speaks of the journey, about the flow of creation, about the impact of choices, and about the divine presence that manifests. When you allow yourself to listen beyond the words, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." If you feel that this search isn't just curiosity, but a transformation that begins within. Because the most impressive thing is that this name still resonates. And what comes next could change everything you thought you knew about it. Not everything in the Bible is taught in churches. And perhaps this is precisely what most bothers those beginning to awaken to the hidden layers of faith. There is a kind of silence that isn't just respect, it's omission. A silence that, over the centuries, has become tradition. And over time, the name ceased to be accessed, not because it disappeared, but because it was veiled by superficial interpretations, dogmas, and adapted translations to maintain control of understanding. When you observe the Tetragrammaton in its original form, YHWH, realize that it's not just a word. It's a code, a spiritual organism that pulsates between letters and voids. And this is one of the first hidden truths. Hebrew letters are not just graphic signs, they are living symbols. They carry meanings that transcend sound. They represent ideas, spiritual movements, archetypes. They are closer to portals than to words. In the Jewish mystical tradition, especially within Kabbalah, each letter has a numerical value, a specific vibration, and a relationship with the forces of creation. The Yod, for example, is the smallest of all letters, almost invisible, therefore represents the starting point, the core of creation, the moment before any manifestation. It's like a cosmic seed. Meanwhile, the He, which appears twice in the Tetragrammaton, is linked to expansion, breath, and revelation. The Vav is a connector, like a spiritual hook between planes. And this already reveals something very important. The name of God, at its root, describes a process of divine manifestation that isn't frozen in time, a continuous cycle, a dynamic of constant creation that also occurs within you, even without you realizing it. Because if God's name represents the journey, from light to form, then you, as image and likeness, also carry this journey within yourself. And this changes everything. It dismantles the idea of a distant, untouchable, unattainable God, and reveals a much more transformative truth. The hidden name is closer than you imagine. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something even more curious that few people realize. Within Hebrew script, the Tetragrammaton has no vowels. And this isn't a floit's, a choice. Traditionally, vowels are sounds that can only be inserted by the voice. In other words, the name of God requires life. It can only be pronounced by one who breathes. It depends on the breath, the intention of the speaker, and even more so on the listener. What does this tell us? That perhaps this name isn't complete on paper, but rather in action. The moment something is pronounced with full awareness, not as just any sound, but as a spiritual call. This leads us to a powerful idea. The name of God isn't a fixed combination of letters, it's a frequency, a vibrating truth. And perhaps that's why it was hidden, because it wasn't just knowledge. It was an experience, a sacred practice. Mystery that, when misinterpreted, could cause more disruption than revelation. Behind the silence of traditions, there is an ancient effort to protect this knowledge. Protect it from whom? Perhaps from ourselves. From our haste, our distraction, our tendency to turn the sacred into routine. Because the name demands presence, and that is rare. It requires surrender, a change of mindset, the courage to look at the divine without the lens of fear. And do you see how all this reframes the way we read Scripture? How we relate to the divine? There's a profound difference between following a doctrine and opening yourself to revelation. And it's in this second path that transformation resides. Because it requires more than belief, it requires awareness, choice, and, above all, openness to the hidden truth that isn't found in the texts, but between the lines. In the pauses, in the symbols, and in the very silence of the name. Comment. Here, I am rediscovering the sacred, if this journey has made sense to you so far. Because there is more, much more, behind the letters that were hidden. And what comes next will reveal another layer that almost no one dares to touch. Before let there be light, there was sound. But not just any sound, not an eyes, not an eye. Ordinary voice. It was an ancient, profound vibration that pierced the void and awakened what had not yet existed. And this vibration carried the name, the Tetragrammaton, a primordial frequency that not only initiated creation, but continues to sustain all life. When the ancient mystics spoke of the Word made flesh, they weren't just pointing to a narrative. They were trying to describe a vibrational experience where sound transforms into form, where the Word becomes the world. This idea changes everything because it forces us to rethink what language is. Perhaps it's not just a means of communication, but of creation. And perhaps the Tetragrammaton wasn't just a name given to God, but the very sound that emanated from Him and shaped the universe. Imagine the impact this has on your spiritual understanding. The world as we know it was born from a sound. And that sound was the name. Not just any name, but the name that carries essence, identity, destiny. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because if everything begins with sound, then every word we utter has the potential to build or destroy. The ancients knew this. They understood that sound was a spiritual force. Therefore, speech was sacred. Silence, too. And within this balance between the spoken and the unsaid, the name of God was seen as the point of origin, the beginning of everything. It was not uttered idly, was not manipulated by empty emotion. It was guarded as a secret that could open or seal invisible doors. The vibration of the Tetragrammaton, according to some forgotten mystical texts, cannot be replicated by impure voices. It requires consciousness, requires presence. Because its structure is not phonetic, it is energetic. When the yod vibrates, it does not emit sound. It initiates, it awakens, it launches a spark into the invisible. The he, in turn, gives body to this spark, like the first breath of life. The vav unites everything, the high and the low, the spirit and the flesh, the heaven and the earth. And the final he seals completes the cycle, transforming potential into reality. Do you see how this touches on something much deeper than just religion? We're talking about creative mindset, of how spiritual decisions shape material realities. And, in this sense, knowing the name Evan silently is already a step toward accessing this power. The very structure of the universe seems to respond to this frequency. The ancients called it the language of creation, a language not made, of syllables, but of intentions, a divine code that can only be understood with an awakened heart. This is why many mystical traditions speak of hearing the voice of God not as an audible sound, but as a perception, a state of alignment where your inner essence resonates with something eternal, something that has always been there, but only reveals itself when you silence the noise of the world. The Tetragrammaton then becomes more than a symbol. It becomes a mirror of your own journey, a reminder that, just as the universe was born from a sound, your life also responds to what you emit, to the sounds you repeat, the words you choose, the silence you respect. This knowledge has been hidden, not because it's unattainable, but because it's so transformative. It shifts you from the position of spectator to the position of co-creator. It forces you to rethink your choices, your vibration, your stance on existence. And above all, it reminds you that there's a hidden truth behind the lyrics, an intelligence behind creation, and a primordial sound that continues to echo. Within you, torment here, the vibe is real. If this content made you feel that there's something greater, invisible, but totally present in the sound that created you. Because what comes next will show how this vibration became language, and how it continues to create worlds to this day. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's impossible to speak of the true essence of the name without traversing the territory of forgotten sources, of texts that were silenced, of what was considered too dangerous to be taught openly. I'm talking about the Zohar, the apocryphal books, the tradition of Kabbalan manuscripts buried for centuries, often found in caves, hidden in chambers, or passed down orally from generation to generation as if they were a spiritual treasure the world was not yet ready to receive, and perhaps it still isn't. Because what these texts reveal about the Tetragrammaton is something that dismantles all conventional language logic. They don't treat it as a name to be read, but as an access code, a seal, a living formula. The Zohar, for example, one of the most profound texts of Jewish mysticism, describes the name as the structure of the universe on 4 levels. It's not talking about grammar, it's talking about reality, a spiritual architecture that begins in the invisible and unfolds into matter, as if each letter were a step on a ladder that connects the human to the divine. And it doesn't stop there. In apocryphal writings, such as fragments from the Book of Enoch, we find indirect references to a name that moves the heavens, a name that angels revere but dare not pronounce without permission. In some passages, there are mentions of beings who fell precisely because they attempted to manipulate this name selfishly, without preparation. This reinforces the idea that the Tetragrammaton is not a symbol of identity, but of power. And power, when misunderstood, can become destruction. Kabbalah also delves into this mystery, revealing that the name, in its purest form, is a reflection of God's creative process. It's not something you simply learn, something you become. Because this sacred code only reveals itself in layers. First, you read it as a symbol, Then you understand it as a path. But only when you live the process of creating, connecting, manifesting, and transforming do you begin to grasp its true meaning. This leads us to an even bolder revelation. The name of God is alive. It pulses. It vibrates with creation. And more it responds. Because it was made to be more than understood. It was made to be experienced in a state of consciousness, in moments of deep alignment. When your inner self becomes silent and opens, the name reveals itself not as an external sound, but as an internal echo. A reminder of what your soul already knew, but had forgotten. That's why these texts were considered dangerous. Because they don't just challenge traditional understanding. They shatter the idea that you need intermediaries to access the sacred. They suggest that the connection with the divine is inscribed within you, and that the true name, the one that creates, transforms, and awakens, is waiting for you. Not on the page, but in presence, in recognition, in the vibration that only occurs when you decide to cross the boundaries of what you've been taught. These hidden sources are not historical curiosities. They are spiritual maps. Maps that many prefer to keep hidden because they show a path too direct to profound. Too uncomfortable for a mindset that prefers control to awakening. But when you begin to explore these revelations, you realize that nothing has been left to chance. Everything is encoded. The name is there, if whispering, hidden between the lines of creation, waiting for someone with eyes to see and ears to hear, to approach with reverence. Write in the comments, the name calls me if. At any point during this dive, you felt that this ancient sound still vibrates within you. Because what is about to be revealed will change your view of time, of existence, and of your own role within this mystery. Now I want to delve even deeper into the subject. Because understanding the Tetragrammaton as a code is just the beginning. What truly begins to change everything is when you see that this name is not outside of you, but within. And not just as an abstract idea, but as a direct reflection of the very structure of your existence. What the mystical texts reveal is that the Tetragrammaton is not just a name of God. It is also a map of the human being, a mirror of the divine within each of us. Each letter carries a creative function, a spiritual dimension, and, surprisingly, a representation of aspects of one's own body and consciousness. The Yod, the first letter, is the seed, the starting point of everything. It is the impulse of the spirit before form, the moment before time, space, and decision. It is the divine spark, the plan that precedes manifestation. Within us, the Yod can be understood as that instant of pure inspiration, even before words. When something within us silently awakens and announces that something great is about to be born. The first He is expansion. It represents the breath of the divine, the breath that gives form to intention. It is where the invisible begins to take shape. In the Kabbalistic tradition, this He symbolizes the sacred feminine, the matrix of creation, the space where potential transforms into reality. In the human body, it is compared to the symbolic womb not only in the biological sense, but as the capacity to generate realities with thought and emotion. The Vav is the connection, the channel that unites the high and the low, the spiritual and the physical. It is the bridge, the hook-shaped letter that connects worlds, ideas, and plans. In human beings, the Vav represents the will that which connects what we feel to what we do. It is the link between intention and action, between spirituality and practice. With every choice we make, it is the Vav that manifests within us, shaping our journey toward what we call destiny. And then comes the second He, which closes the cycle, but not as an end, as a crowning achievement, as a concretization. It represents the material world, the final form that arises from the union of all the previous elements. It is the reality we can touch, but which still carries the echo of the invisible in its structure. In us, this He represents the body, the action, the expression in the world of what has been thought, felt, and connected. This is when the Spirit becomes presence now, beyond the structure. The most revealing thing is to understand that the Tetragrammaton can also be read as a journey, the human being's own journey toward the sacred. Each time you begin a new cycle, something within you begins with a yada point of light. When you breathe this impulse and let it grow, you enter the first he. By making a decision and creating a path, you activate the vav, and when you manifest this in the world, you experience the second he. This is the path of creation. This is the path of inner revelation. Therefore, to say that the name of God is unpronounceable is perhaps another way of saying it can only be lived. It's not enough to speak it. You must embody each letter, each stage, each vibration. And this doesn't happen in a single moment, but in cycles. In each conscious decision, in each respected silence, in each profound transformation. The name reveals itself when you become it. This understanding, which seems symbolic, is actually extremely practical, because it changes your perception of time, pain, and purpose. If each moment is a part of the name manifesting, then nothing is accidental. Everything is an invitation. Every crisis, every revelation, every loss, and every rebirth is pushing you closer to what the name represents. Presence, wholeness, unity, and that's precisely why this knowledge was protected. Because it gives power back to the individual. It shows that there is no separation between sacred and profane, between divine and human, between God and creation. Everything vibrates within the same name, and when you align with this, you no longer need to seek answers outside. You begin to remember. Comment here. I am part of the name, if this resonated with you in any way. Because now, we are about to cross the layer where the name not only represents, but activates. And it is at this point that mystery becomes experience. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because there's something few realize when they come across the Tetragrammaton, what isn't written also speaks. The space between the letters, the interval between the yod and the he, between the he and the vav, carries a kind of silence that isn't absence, but pure presence, a vibrant silence. And perhaps the true power of the name lies not in what it says, but in what it holds. It's difficult to explain in words the impact of this perception. Because we live in a world that values sound, speech, and noise. But the ancient master's new sound is born of silence. Vibration can only exist because there is a point of rest that precedes it, and that point is where the divine hides. Therefore, when we speak the name of God, we are not simply trying to pronounce sacred letters. We are trying to align ourselves with the silence between them, a silence that pulses with the rhythm of creation. What if the true power of the name lies precisely there, not in speaking, but in pausing, not in repeating, but in listening? What happens when you surrender completely to this subtle space where there is no control, no ego, no rush? It is in this state of listening that the essence begins to reveal itself. And it is in this state that, according to the occult texts, the name begins to work within you. This is the part that was never taught in sermons, because it demands real transformation. It asks you to shed rigid forms, inherited names, and preconceived notions. It asks you to embark on an inner journey where the name is not something learned, but something remembered, something you've always known, but which has been covered by layers of noise, fear, and distraction. And when you start to remember, something changes. The way you breathe changes. The way you decide changes. You begin to feel a constant presence between the events of your life, as if everything were connected by invisible threads. As if the name were written between the lines of your encounters, your losses, your deepest insights. And this isn't a metaphor. This is direct impact. Because the Tetragrammaton isn't just an ancient mystery, it's a living language. It's an answer to the questions you never dared to ask. It's the reflection of a divine mind that doesn't think like us, that leaves clues, fragments, echoes. And perhaps the greatest of all these echoes is this: the name doesn't want to be possessed. It wants to be inhabited. That's why so many avoid speaking about it out loud, not for fear of punishment, but because of the weight of responsibility. Because knowing the name is carrying within oneself the power to create, to change destinies, to access invisible realities. It's crossing a line between what is ordinary and what is eternal. And now, imagine. What would happen if someone dared to pronounce this name aloud, in the right place, at the right time? This isn't just a hypothesis. There are records, accounts, codes, and traditions that speak of it. Not as a legend, but as something that could yet happen. And when it does, nothing will remain the same. Come here. Silence also speaks. If at any point on this journey you felt that there is something between the words that can only be heard with an awakened soul, because the next step is not about reading, it's about vibrating. And what comes next may be the revelation your essence has long awaited. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this content spoke directly to you. Maybe it was an old memory, a sense of familiarity, or simply that silence that remained after everything that was said. And if this touched you in any way, it's worth continuing this journey. Subscribe to the channel so you don't lose the thread of this mystery, because what we're building here is more than videos. It's a journey of rediscovery, layer by layer, letter by letter. And if this video brought you clarity, doubt, or even peace, leave a like. This shows that this type of content makes sense and helps us keep this vibe alive. And write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end," just so I know who really dived in until the last second. Your presence here is what makes all this real. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and follow me there, because the next revelation could be just a breath away.